Hello and welcome to this webinar on staff mental health and wellbeing. I'm Dr. Leanne Pickering and I'm an educational psychologist at West Sussex County Council, and I work with the mental health support teams in schools. This webinar should take approximately 30 minutes to complete and has been written for all staff in schools and colleges, including both primary and secondary schools, and is suitable for senior leadership team, teaching and support staff. The aims of this webinar are to support school staff to understand what good mental health is and to raise awareness of the importance of promoting staff wellbeing and mental health in schools. To have an overview of what research and survey data show with regards to teacher wellbeing, including levels of stress experienced and the factors which affect this. To raise awareness of the association between staff and student wellbeing, and to briefly discuss the mediating factors which may account for this link. To discuss approaches to supporting staff wellbeing and mental health that can be implemented on a whole school level by senior leaders in school. To discuss self-care strategies that can support an individual's wellbeing so that you can begin to develop your own mental health and wellbeing toolkit. And finally, to signpost you to other websites or resources where you can find further information or support. Before we go any further, it's important to think about what good mental health is. Often, when we think about mental health, we instantly think about something negative. In the media, mental health is often portrayed as a problem needing to be fixed. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, you'll no doubt have seen many media articles talking about young people's mental health difficulties, the difficulties they experience in accessing external support, and the lack of capacity within the mental health service to help treat children and young people. But actually, when you look at the definition of mental health provided by the World Health Organization, you can see the focus is different. Mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own ability, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. This statement is about the positive aspects of well-being and how we cope with everyday stresses so that we can make a contribution in different areas of our life. So you might be wondering why this is important. The main reason is that how we perceive mental health affects our approach. If we perceive it as a problem to be fixed, we are going to be constantly stuck in a reactive or firefighting position. However, if we recognise the positive aspects of mental health, then we will work proactively to prevent difficulties developing from the start. So the key question is, what can we do in schools on a preventative level so that issues don't start to begin with? We know that good mental health is about more than just the absence of mental health problems. So the first thing we need to do is to create cultures within our school communities which promote well-being and good mental health. It's been suggested that mental health is so integral to health and well-being that there is no health without it. Mental health is also dynamic in that it can change throughout life and in response to our different life experiences. While we may currently have good mental health, this doesn't mean that we won't experience mental health needs in the future. And likewise, someone who is experiencing mental health difficulties may not always do so and may recover. Mental health is also not the same for everyone. It's affected by a number of different factors, including socioeconomic factors, such as a rapid change in our circumstances, biological or genetic factors, our personality, as well as our environment, such as work-related stress. While one individual may experience mental health difficulties in response to a particular life experience, this will not be the same for everyone, as what affects one person may not affect someone else. Take lockdown as an example. Everyone's experiences were different, and likewise, we all responded in different ways. While one event or experience may appear to be the trigger for mental health difficulties, it's important to recognise that we might not always be aware of other factors affecting people or possible cumulative effects. Often, the language we use in schools includes terms like social and emotional well-being, resilience, emotional literacy, and social and emotional intelligence. While the examples you see on the screen show some of the different terms we use to refer to aspects of mental health and well-being, this isn't an exhaustive list. It's worth noting that essentially we have a myriad of different terms to say the same thing. With regards to mental health and teacher wellbeing, I just wanted to draw your attention to some recent figures. Overall, it is known that approximately 1 in 4 adults in the UK experiences a mental health condition in any given year, relative to about 1 in 10 children and young people. In 2019, an Ofsted survey was carried out which found that just over a third of school and further education staff reported low levels of occupational well-being, with nearly 2/3 reporting that they often or always experience stress in their work. While these findings are not unexpected, the level of stress being experienced by education staff is clearly far too high and leads to many teachers leaving the profession or being absent from work. As a result of these findings, it was recognised that improving the occupational well-being of education staff needs to be a priority. The Teacher Wellbeing Index, carried out in 2019 by Education Support, found that approximately 72% of education staff who responded described themselves as stressed, and that 34% experienced a mental health issue in the past year. 57% had considered leaving the education sector in the past 2 years due to pressures on their health and well-being. The research also indicated that 78% of all educational professionals reported experiencing at least one of the following symptoms due to their work. Behavioural symptoms such as irritability, mood swings, and changes in eating habit. Physical symptoms such as headaches or raised blood pressure and muscle tension. Or psychological symptoms such as anxiety and depression. While we know that there are a range of factors which affect staff well-being, the Anna Freud Centre for Children and Families identified several key factors in their consultation with school staff in 2018, which led to the development of 10 steps towards staff well-being, and I'll provide a reference to this document at the end of the webinar. So I don't want to spend a lot of time discussing the factors affecting staff well-being, as I'm sure many of you will have first-hand experience of at least some of these. One of the most consistent factors which has the biggest impact is perhaps unsurprisingly workload. We know that teachers often work long hours outside of their teaching commitments, which has a negative impact on their work-life balance and can make it difficult to separate work from home. Where school leaders and staff have worked hard to reduce workload and working hours, this has had a really positive impact on staff well-being. Part of the workload we know is administrative and paper-based tasks like planning and marking, and some of it is probably related to the issue of accountability and the stressful impact of Ofsted inspections and expectations around academic outcomes and achievement. Then added to this, we have other factors like the stress caused by concern for pupils, alongside difficulties which can occur at times, such as challenging relationships with parents, colleagues, or senior leaders in school. When we experience high levels of stress over prolonged periods of time, this can place people under extreme pressure to the point at which they feel exhausted, burned out, and are no longer able to cope. This might happen if we feel permanently overworked under time pressure, or if we're experiencing ongoing difficulties in our relationships, such as conflict with our colleagues. We also know that staff in helping professions, like teaching, are extremely committed to their role and responsibilities, but that this might sometimes come at the expense or neglect of their own needs. It's important to recognise the cumulative effect of stress, and that burnout isn't necessarily just about work-related stress, but may also occur in response to other stresses that people may be dealing with, including in their personal life. With burnout, we need to look out for signs and symptoms of exhaustion, both physical and emotional, difficulty coping, and possibly low levels of energy. We should also look out for signs that people are becoming increasingly frustrated with their job, such as being overly negative about their work, emotionally distancing themselves, or experiencing low levels of motivation. When we experience burnout, this can impact on our job performance with regards to everyday tasks and with our home life, and it may be difficult to concentrate, to manage conflict, or to make effective decisions. A battery can be a useful way of thinking about or describing burnout. Imagine that energy is produced from a small battery in your body. As you expend energy throughout the day, power is drained from the battery. Through breaks, lunch, laughter, feeling good about your work, receiving compliments and praise, and so forth, your battery is recharged and you continue to function well. Without this, our battery continues to drain and eventually runs out of power. In order to prevent burnout, we need to look after ourselves, and we're going to come on to developing a toolkit a little bit later on. First, we're just going to take a moment to think about what schools and educational settings can do to support and improve staff well-being. There are lots of different approaches that we can take to promote staff well-being, and while some of these would need to be discussed and carefully planned and implemented by senior leaders in school, others are relatively simple steps that can be taken. Based on the findings of the surveys, we know that reducing workload is one of the most effective ways to promote staff well-being, and although we recognise and appreciate that this is challenging, we also know that there are schools who have worked hard to reduce workload and have made good progress in achieving this. Other strategies that may help include effective communication, especially between senior leaders and teaching or support staff. Also, the leadership team being approachable so that staff feel able to voice their concerns or difficulties when needed. While many professions, including my own as an educational psychologist, requires regular supervision, this practice is less well developed in schools, despite teaching being a highly stressful and demanding occupation. Survey responses have shown that school staff feel that regular supervision, either one-to-one or in small groups, would help them to manage the emotional impact of their work, and that they would value the opportunity for support with any serious concerns they have about children and young people's well-being. Other suggested approaches include protecting staff breaks, ensuring opportunities and equity of access to training and development for all staff. One of the most important things is to ensure that staff have an environment where they feel comfortable seeking support from other staff. And a staff wellbeing audit can be a helpful way to explore what is working well and what else can be done to support staff in school. Finally, it's important to remember to take the time to celebrate and share successes, not just with regards to children and young people, but also staff success. They don't have to be anything big. It's about noticing the small things that happen, sharing positive experiences with our colleagues, recognising the things that other people do to help or support us, and showing our appreciation or gratitude. Before we move on to thinking about developing your own self-care toolkit, I just wanted to quickly talk about the importance of teacher wellbeing for students. Wellbeing in schools needs to begin with staff because it's hard to promote children's wellbeing if staff wellbeing is low or teachers are experiencing burnout. The reason for this is that there is a direct association between teacher and student wellbeing, and this is being shown by research. In a study by Harding et al. 2019, it was found that high teacher wellbeing was associated with high student wellbeing and low levels of student psychological difficulties. They indicated that a number of factors may have had an important role in this association, including the quality of teacher-student relationships and teacher presenteeism. It has been suggested that better quality relationships help students to feel more connected to the school, which may promote a sense of belonging and positive well-being. Teacher presenteeism, where teachers continue to work despite experiencing low well-being and poor mental health, may also partly account for the relationship between teacher and student well-being, with one suggestion being that this impacts negatively on teacher performance and classroom management and the quality of their relationship with their students. So how do we begin to develop our own toolkit or toolbox to manage stress? First, it's important to be aware of what causes us to feel stressed and when our stress levels are high, but also to think about what helps us to rest and relax. If we think back to the idea of a battery, what are the energy drains and what helps us to recharge? When building our own toolkit, we need to think about what is working well already and add to this. Keep your toolkit in mind from this point on and think about what you might put in it. There isn't time to talk through lots of different strategies in this webinar, but I'm going to take you through a few different ideas just to get started. Many of you will already be familiar with the 5 ways to well-being, which are a set of evidence-based actions to promote mental well-being. This isn't to say that there aren't other factors which have a big impact, but instead suggests that there are simple things we can do on an everyday basis that can help to boost or maintain our well-being. I'm going to briefly talk through each one in turn, giving a few suggestions of things we can do to achieve these. Connect. We know that relationships with other people are a fundamental human need and that they're important for promoting well-being and buffering against mental health difficulties for people of all ages. It's important that we're able to connect with other people, as our relationships give us the opportunity to share positive experiences and help to give us a sense of belonging. The COVID-19 pandemic has possibly highlighted our need to connect in a way that we might not previously have been able to imagine, and we've had to adapt to a virtual world where we connect with people via phone or video calls rather than face-to-face. For some people, lockdown also gave them the opportunity to connect more with close family, such as enabling families to eat together at mealtimes when parents might otherwise have been commuting. Perhaps this shows us now more than ever how important it is to connect in whatever way we can. Other ways we could connect include arranging to meet with friends you haven't seen for a while, having lunch with a colleague, either in person or virtually, taking time out to spend with family, such as playing a game together or eating together at mealtimes, using our active listening skills to really listen to what someone is telling us, or talking to someone rather than sending them an email. The next area is be active. Regular physical activity promotes emotional well-being and is associated with lower rates of depression and anxiety across all age groups. However, exercise doesn't need to be particularly intense for you to feel good. Slow-paced activities such as walking are known to be beneficial as they can encourage social interactions as well as providing some level of exercise. Here are a few other ideas. You could take the stairs, not the lift. Go for a walk at lunchtime. You could walk to or from work. Have a kickabout at a local park, obviously following social distancing guidelines as needed. You could do some easy exercise like stretching before you leave for work in the morning. The next area is take notice. It's important we remind ourselves to take notice, as paying more attention to the present moment helps to boost our well-being and can strengthen and broaden our awareness. This mindfulness allows us to notice what is happening in the present, which can include our thoughts and feelings, our body, and the world around us. There are lots of things we can do to enjoy the moment or be more mindful in our everyday life. We could notice the sensations that we experience in daily activities, such as the taste and texture of the food we eat, the feeling of the air moving past us when we walk, or the pavement below our feet. We could try something new, such as sitting in a different chair or getting a new plant for your desk. You could take a different route on your way to or from work, or when you go out for a walk. Notice your thoughts. If you practice mindfulness, you can notice your thoughts coming and going without having to dwell on them or be distracted by them. You can notice and name your feelings. You could also notice how your colleagues are feeling or acting. The next area is keep learning. Research shows that learning new skills can improve our mental well-being by boosting our confidence and self-esteem and giving us goals to achieve and a sense of purpose. It can also help us to connect with others by encouraging social interactions, even if at a distance. You might not feel like you have enough time, or there may not be anything in particular you feel you need to learn, but there are lots of small activities we do every day that brings learning into our lives. We could find out something about one of our colleagues. We could read the news or a book. We can do a crossword puzzle or a Sudoku. We can research something that we've always wondered about. We could do something like learning a new word. The final way to well-being is giving to others. Research suggests that acts of giving and kindness can help improve mental well-being by giving us a sense of reward or positivity, giving us a sense of purpose, and helping us to connect with others. Giving doesn't need to be something big. It can be just a small act of kindness towards other people. For example, saying thank you to someone for something that they have done for you, asking friends, family, or colleagues how they are and really listening to their answer, spending time with friends or relatives who need support, or offering to help someone that we know with a task. Individuals who report a greater interest in helping others are more likely to rate themselves as happy. And research has shown that committing an act of kindness once a week over a 6-week period is associated with an increase in well-being. There are lots of different self-care assessments available, but the most important thing is that through our self-awareness, we're able to identify stress and pressure early on so that we can put in place effective strategies to maintain our self-care. Often we use the argument that we don't have time for self-care, but what we know is that it is important to develop long-term self-care practices and to stick to these in order to build up our overall well-being and resilience. If you have the time, please feel free to pause the webinar and have a go at completing the self-care assessment, thinking carefully about which areas you are okay with, which areas you feel you could do better, and which you feel need to be addressed or changed urgently. If you'd prefer, you can find other more in-depth self-care assessments online, and if you're short for time, you can leave this and come back to it when you have more time and are able to complete it at your own pace. The most important thing is to be able to reflect on your own self-care so that you can identify any strategies that help to maintain it, as well as identify any areas that you feel need to be changed. Thinking about your own self-care, here are some reflective questions for you to think about. If you don't have time to think about them properly now, then like before, you can come back to them when you have a bit more time to sit quietly and reflect. If you do have the time, then please pause the webinar and think about 1. What are 3 things you do regularly to take care of yourself? 2. What are 3 things your school does to take care of its staff? 3. Were there any things you did during lockdown that made a difference to your well-being or that you would like to continue? 4. What things have you not done lately that would make a difference to your self-care? And 5. Take notice of what needs urgent change on your self-care list. What are the potential barriers and how can you get around these? Ongoing stress can push us so that we move out of balance with ourselves, with others, and with our environment. When our home and work life are in balance, our body and our mind are also more likely to be in balance. Here are a few things to think about. Do you only talk about work, even when you're at home? Can you enjoy time watching TV with a family member without thinking about what you have to do tomorrow at work? Is it difficult to watch shows depicting suffering or dysfunction? When these things happen, it may be a sign that you are out of balance and at higher risk of burnout. However, even small changes which improve our work-life balance can help to prevent or reduce the risk of burnout. While I recognise that the boundaries between work and home have become more blurred during lockdown, we know that clear boundaries help to address work-related stress and that it's now more important than ever to establish or re-establish clear coming home rituals. So in order to do this, we need to develop a ritual or routine that signifies the end of a work day. That will either be before you head home, on your way home, or something that you do when you get home. It could be that you turn off your work phone before going into the house, or you might sit in the car for 5 minutes after you've arrived home just to breathe and relax. You could mark a boundary before going into your house, or create a to-do list for the next working day so that you can let go of any worry before heading home. While driving home, teachers sometimes like to listen to audiobooks, call a friend, or just sit in silence to decompress. A ritual can even be something as simple as taking your lanyard off, changing your clothes, or taking a bath once you get home. It's so easy to be overwhelmed and let the job consume you, but teaching is about balance. Try and focus on your home relationships when you get home and not on your work. Is there a time that you know that you become tense? For example, after the children are in bed. This is when you could plan in some sort of relaxation activity or phone a friend. A little bit earlier, I talked through the 5 ways to well-being, and one of these was to take notice. One way we can do this is through mindfulness, which is when we have intentional and non-judgmental awareness of the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that we're experiencing in the present moment. Research has shown that mindfulness is associated with higher qualities of life, longer sleep durations, increased happiness, and life satisfaction. If we spend our time focusing on worrying thoughts, we might miss out on what's happening around us, and we might not notice things like the sound of birdsong, the reflection of the sunlight on a surface, the smell of freshly cut grass, the smile from another person, or the subtle changes of the seasons. Mindfulness pays attention to the present, so we're not lost in our thoughts about the past and worries about the future. If we try to focus on the present, life can feel more manageable. For some people, this was something that helped them to get through lockdown by focusing on what was happening in that moment. And some people reported being more aware of the world around them, such as the quietness of having no road or air traffic, or the sound of birds in their garden. Mindfulness helps us to focus on the present, and importantly, it helps us feel calmer. There is also evidence that mindfulness can treat a range of health conditions, build resilience, support more effective performance at work, and improve well-being overall. Some major corporations around the world have made mindfulness available to staff, including Google, Apple, and IKEA. Mindfulness provides a way for staff to shut out the noise and gain some much-needed respite, and it can be an effective way to mark the boundary between work and home life. This webinar is just a brief introduction to staff wellbeing, and there are lots of different activities or tools you can have in your toolkit to increase wellbeing. Before we finish, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to take a moment to practice the quiet mind. Here I've suggested a few different ideas, and I'm going to briefly explain what each one is and what's involved. We all respond differently to these types of activities, and it's important to work out which ones work best for us as an individual. For some people, the benefits of mindfulness are noticed immediately, but it's also not unusual for people to give up early on without realizing that, like many things, we often need lots of practice before we start to notice any effect. The first activity you could try is a mental focus exercise. This is where you place an object in front of you and try to remain focused on this for as long as possible. You need to stare at the object and keep watch when your mind starts to wander, so you can just bring your focus back to the object. The longer you can remain focused, the more your mindfulness will increase. Another mindfulness activity you can try is the body scan, which can be done while sitting or lying down. The goal is to slowly move your attention through different parts of your body, noticing the feelings you have as you proceed. This mental scan helps to develop your awareness of bodily sensations and the mind-body connection. It helps to release tension and quiet the mind through its focus on each part of the body, and can help to increase our awareness of how our emotional experiences affect us physically. Mindful breathing is a simple mindfulness practice where we focus our attention on our breathing, its rhythm and flow, and notice the way each inhale and exhale feels. As our thoughts occur, we can let them come and go without getting caught up in them. Another activity you can try is journaling. This can take lots of different forms, from an empty notebook where you write down reflections on your thoughts and feelings, to gratitude diaries where you write down something each day that you are grateful for. Finally, I would just like to talk you through the 5 senses experience. This mindfulness activity can help you to feel grounded in the here and now, and is good to try if you don't have much time. The goal is to notice something you're experiencing through your senses. So before we begin, just take a moment to make sure you are sitting somewhere quiet where you won't be disrupted and that you are sitting comfortably. Now I'd like you to take a moment to think about 5 things you can see. Look around you and notice things that you haven't noticed before. Is there a pattern on the wall? Is the light reflecting on a surface? Or is there an object in the corner of the room that you hadn't noticed before, or that you'd forgotten about? Now think about 4 things you can feel. Notice the pressure of your feet on the floor, your clothes resting against your skin. If you have something to hand, pick up an object and notice how it feels. What texture does it have? Is it warm or is it cold? Next, I'd like to bring your attention to 3 things you can hear. Notice the sound of my voice and any sounds in the background that you might have been filtering out. Sounds like the birds chirping outside, the cars in a distant road, or the wind blowing through the trees. Now, think about 2 things you can smell. What does the air in the room smell like? Can you smell nearby plants or other soft smells that you don't always notice? Is there a smell of coffee or freshly cut grass? Or maybe there's a smell that you don't like. Finally, think about 1 thing you can taste. Maybe take a sip of water and notice how it tastes. Eat a snack or taste a piece of gum. You could even taste the air as you breathe and notice how it tastes on your tongue. So now we've travelled through the 5 senses in this guided mindfulness practice, you might like to take a moment to reflect on how you're feeling and what you're noticing. While mindfulness is just one way to help boost well-being, hopefully this might give you the opportunity to start thinking about how you can begin incorporating mindfulness into your everyday life. So that brings us to the end of this webinar, providing an introduction to staff well-being. This final slide includes some links to websites and resources that you might find helpful if you want to find out more about staff well-being. Finally, I would just like to say thank you for listening, and I really hope that some of the information in this webinar will help you on your way to well-being.